Hey there, how's it going? This is Jeff Slayer here. Thanks for joining us today. Today I'm just going to show you how to configure Mortal Kombat 4 on the PC. Now, Mortal Kombat 4, to briefly surmise, in case you haven't caught up with some of my other videos, or maybe if you aren't familiar with the gaming franchise, is an iconic gaming franchise that started in the early 90s and was famous in the arcade and the console ports for its use of realistic digitized sprites in the first three editions and its remasters up till 1996. And it was quite popular, but with characters based on popular stereotypes and an interesting fantasy-based story with a mix of a human and a fantasy touch. And it's quite popular. It was quite popular in the arcades, and even today, all of a sudden, retro arcades are putting up Mortal Kombat machines or arcade one-up machines that emulate them. And a lot of people, even in their 40s, are suddenly getting back to this game they played up in the 90s, or introducing their kids to it and stuff. So currently, we're up to Mortal Kombat 1 from 2023. So the games from the 2010s and the 2020s have a different charm to them in terms of their visuals and technical excellence, though they do get mixed feedback on certain aspects, and they're more optimized for the competitive scene. But the original trilogy for the base fans was what started it all. And though that hasn't aged that well on the PC, it's pretty good in the arcade. Now, Mortal Kombat 4 is an interesting game that sits in between both the trilogy and the 3D era and the subsequent 2010s rehash to the 2.5D scale and ultra fast, ultra tech games that came in. So, Mortal Kombat 4, at the time it came out in the arcade, was pretty high tech. But when it came out in the arcades, that's when the arcade scene was dying down, and the home ports at the time didn't quite have the technology to, transition the full arcade quality and content onto it. So it was still pretty good, but given that fans were used to the original trilogy and the way it was presented on the home ports was different from the arcades, and the arcades were dying out. Initially, the home ports got a mixed review, but this game somewhat remained popular. Like I heard, in South America till the mid 2000s, there was still an arcade game machine here or there of people playing Mortal Kombat 4. And on the PC, while its graphics were a bit dated, they're still relatively presentable compared to other than the weird character bodies. And they don't look like it's a 30-year-old game at all. They still look pretty presentable. And most importantly, for the purists, the speed and the finesse and the fluidity of the gameplay is still pretty good. So, although Mortal Kombat 4 is a niche stage, not many genuine fans of the series get into it as much as I do, but it's still a pretty popular thing. So, I've put up separate videos reviewing this game, or separate videos of my gameplay on the PC. I'll put a link to those underneath as well. So that's that. So now let's get into the configuration, because this is a pretty old game, so there are very few official sources for it. And the only official source I know where you can purchase this is GOG.com. Now, GOG.com is pretty nice. You can either download their installer like Steam or run it from there, or unlike Steam, they allow you, once you buy a game, they allow you to download its installer and pretty much install and run it without their interface, which is pretty nice as well, which is what I've done. And once you do that, you'll have a folder called GOG Games. Once you download their exe installer, that's pretty easy. I'm sure that if you could start this video, you'd know how to run that installer and do that. So I'm not going to show you that one. So once you run the installer and you've got the GOG Games folder on your computer, you go to Mortal Kombat 4, in case that's the only game you bought for them or otherwise. And once you go through the Mortal Kombat 4 folder, you'll see a number of things like Mortal Kombat 4, the launcher, the manual, which I'll cover in a separate video. And then there's something called Nglide config. Now, Nglide is actually used for something else. It's like a 3D FX glide wrapper and meant for doing things without having a card or whatnot. But it works very differently to support Windows 11 PCs. Now, I must commend these guys at GOG.com for the research they did on the versions of Mortal Kombat 1 to 3 that they sell. They have actually included a DOS box emulator, but they've even included a configurator. So you don't need to manually edit configuration files or some junk like that. You can just run the panel and migrate and emulate. Now, similarly, they are pretty smart because they read up and they probably knew that a lot of people online say you need something like Nglide, or there could be other software you need to patch up and clean up MK4 to make it run on a modern PC. So they have actually included a configurator, which I'll show you here, which makes it pretty easy, which will already be in their MK4 folder from GOG.com. Now, before I get into this configurator, I just need to tell you a few things. So now I'm using an Acer Predator Helios Neo 16, which is a gaming laptop from the mid to 2023, and it has like a 6 GB RTX 160 Ti graphics card, 16 GB RAM, and a 13th generation i7, which was around the latest back then, and it's got a 15.7-inch screen, or I think maybe a slightly bigger one, but yeah, never really got into that. But yeah, it's a pretty decent screen and whatnot. So it's pretty good tech. And I normally run Mortal Kombat 1 and Mortal Kombat from 2023 and Mortal Kombat Ultimate from 2020 on ultra settings in this one. So it's pretty high tech. But initially, when I ran Mortal Kombat 4 without the end glide, it was pretty ordinary. But even before the end glide, what you need to do is that in this old MK4, at least on my gaming laptop, I don't know if it'll happen in yours, even if you selected Direct 3D, it wasn't recognizing your the graphics card of your device, and it was reverting back to glide. So I've had to go to Control Panel and the graphics settings. Or in Windows 11, you can directly choose graphics from settings without going to the control panel. And from there, you can browse by app, and you can choose a particular app and then direct your computer as to what processor it uses, graphics processor it uses, a render one, or in my case, the high performance Nvidia processor. So you had to manually, through your settings in Windows 11, force it to recognize, forcibly allocate your Nvidia gaming processor, or whatever 3D card, your graphics card you're using, to this game. Once you've done that, now you come to this folder and you open Nglide over here. Now, once you open this Nglide panel, you got to choose the video backend as DirectX. I don't know what Vulkan is, it didn't run for me. And then when it comes to these options, refresh rate by app default, vertical sync, you let it be on the default off and all that, because this is normally chosen by app. And 3D logo splash screen, this doesn't really matter much. I just chose on and off. Gamma correction, I let it be 1:1. Refresh rate, I let it be by the app. But now the key things here are screen resolution and aspect ratio. In all the videos that I've streamed of this, including my live stream and my explanatory video on how I beat this game and my review, I had the resolution set at 1920 to 1200, and I've chosen the entire screen as default. Now, the resolution you choose will depend on your screen size, but bear in mind, when you choose the aspect ratio as entire screen, depending upon the size of your computer or laptop screen, some arenas can look a bit stretched. The game still looks beautiful, but some arenas do feel like, somebody is like stretching. Really stretch them out a bit. So that's what you've got to be careful about. And you could choose aspect correction, which corrects the aspect, but while that doesn't run in full screen, it does leave some gaps on the left and the right. But if that's not too much of a problem for you, it's almost full screen, that's okay. But the other things I've been trying is I tried integer scaling. Integer scaling made it pretty sharp, but irrespective of the resolution you choose, then it runs in a medium sized box on the middle of your screen. So you probably don't want that. So then I ultimately chose integer rendering. And with integer rendering, what I found is that it ran to the same size as aspect correction. It was almost full screen with just a bit of width left on the left or the right, but it was big enough, and the graphics and the size of the arenas and everything seemed commensurate with what was there on arcade and the consoles, albeit the arcades had a bit more detail in the background, but everything looked very proportional for me in integer rendering. But a lot of people still use entire screen. So what you need to do is you need to experiment between, like, resolutions, either the one that fits your screen or one or two just above or below it. That if your screen is 1680 to 1050, try the two below or two above. and stuff like that. And then you with the aspect ratio, I would say experiment between entire screen for the full screen, or integer rendering for like beautiful graphics or whatnot at a relatively full screen. Or if you choose integer scaling, it would be pretty beautiful, but it will barely be running full screen. It'll be running like a box in the middle. But if unless you're that particular, so I would probably say, yeah, that experiment between entire screen and integer rendering, and look at a resolution which is like at the resolution of your screen, or a couple of one or two here or there. So that's my advice to you. And then once you do that, you click apply, and then the game should run beautifully. So I have put down a couple of videos of how it runs once I do the setup, though most of my videos were taken in full screen. So at the end of this clip, I've also just put up a video of how it runs with integer scaling, and like this option. So because all of the videos I basically showed you were either 1920 200 or 1920 to 440 with the entire screen. This is how my other videos on this are. So I'll put a link to those, but here at the end I'll also show you what it looks like if I choose a slightly bigger resolution and integer rendering. So, yep, I'll just show that to you shortly as well. And yeah, it should be pretty interesting as we get into it. Hey, you know what? I thought that let me save you some time. I'm going to show you both resolutions in this video. So here, for commencing from the 11 minutes 11-second mark, we see what it looks like if you select integer rendering, even with a high resolution. It's not bad, but it's clearly not full screen. You can see the full minute screen option at the 12 minutes 22-second mark. That actually starts setting up at the 12 minutes marks, but in full screen, the menus look a bit more stretched, but the actual gameplay isn't too bad looking. So you can see that at the full screen at the 12 minutes 22-second mark. And here we've basically got integer rendering, which is a bit prettier, but not entirely full screen. So in both of them, the game still looks beautiful, though, as you'd see in the rest of this clip. At some point, if your camera goes behind a wall, you can see the edge of the wall floating around as a broken edge, but that's pretty rare. On the whole, it's still pretty good looking for a game that's so old. So that's it from my side. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm sure this is not the only way to set this game up. I mean, there are other graphics card other than the Nvidia one I use, and there could be other softwares or other sources for getting this game and setting it up. But this is the one that I found from GOG, and this is how, using Nglide, I set it up for my Nvidia graphics card and high performance processor. So do let me know if that helped. I hope you enjoy this video, and let me know your comments and other tips. So that's pretty good. Oh yeah, all these characters have alien throws, but yeah, good, intercepted her. Oh gosh, she intercepted me as well. So oh yeah, I've turned off mode. You can do that in this game. You can't do that later.